It was the dawn of December 10th, 1941. The humid air over the South China Sea shimmered with heat, and the horizon glowed faintly pink, a deceptive calm before catastrophe. Cutting through the still waters were two of Britain's proudest warships, HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse, leading a small escort of destroyers. Their mission was bold and clear: intercept the advancing Japanese invasion forces striking along Malaya's eastern coast. Yet unseen in the sky above, dozens of enemy bombers were already on their way, drawn by reports that had sealed the fate of Force Z hours before it even sighted the enemy. Aboard Prince of Wales, radar operators caught flickers, brief, uncertain signals on the edge of detection. Then came the order that froze every heartbeat: action stations. Within seconds, alarms wailed across the decks. Men sprinted to their guns, and watertight doors slammed shut. There would be no grand naval duel, no thunder of distant guns, only shadows falling from the sky, and the realization that Britain's mightiest ships were utterly alone, hundreds of miles from help. The attack was coming. By the late 1930s, the British Empire's naval supremacy, the power that had once ruled every ocean, was beginning to show cracks. Years of interwar disarmament treaties and relentless budget cuts had thinned the Royal Navy to its limit. Across the globe, commitments in Europe and the Mediterranean consumed ships, men, and resources. And far to the east, the jewel of Britain's imperial defense, the Singapore Naval Base, completed in 1938, stood like a fortress without a fleet. It was meant to be the Empire's stronghold in Asia, but when war came, its harbor was filled with silence. As Japan's ambitions in the Pacific grew bolder, British strategists faced an impossible dilemma. Their most powerful warships, the battleships and carriers, were all needed elsewhere to guard the Atlantic convoys and Mediterranean lifelines. The Far East, by contrast, had almost nothing. No major surface fleet, and more dangerously, no carrier-based air power. Still, Prime Minister Winston Churchill believed that sending two capital ships to Singapore would project strength and deter aggression. To him, the arrival of HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse would remind the world and the Japanese that Britain remained a global naval power. But beneath the optimism lay a hard truth. The Royal Navy was stretched thin, and the age of battleship supremacy was already slipping away. When Japan's intentions became unmistakable, British planners knew the Far East stood dangerously exposed. Yet, rather than withdraw, Prime Minister Winston Churchill made a bold and fateful decision. Against the caution of several senior admirals, he ordered two capital ships, HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse, to sail for Singapore. Their mission was less about military strength and more about symbolism, a show of imperial resolve meant to deter Japanese aggression before it spread further south. The small task force, later codenamed Force Z, was never meant to fight a major battle. It was a gesture, a bluff of power in a region where the Royal Navy's reach had faded. But the gesture rested on dangerously outdated assumptions that battleships still ruled the seas, and that air power could never sink them. The man chosen to command Force Z was Admiral Sir Tom Phillips, a disciplined officer whose career had flourished in staff planning rather than combat. Recently promoted to Command-in-Chief of the Eastern Fleet, he carried both confidence and conviction, but little experience in the fast-changing world of carrier warfare. To him, the battleship remained the ultimate weapon of sea control, its armor and guns symbols of British might. Phillips had two giants under his command: Prince of Wales, fresh from her duel with the German Bismarck, and Repulse, a World War I-era battlecruiser modernized but still lightly armored. Yet, Like many in Whitehall and Singapore, he underestimated Japan's air power, convinced their aircraft were mere imitations of Western designs, and their pilots untested and inferior. These illusions, born of arrogance and outdated doctrine, would soon meet their reckoning in the skies above the South China Sea. From the beginning, Force Z was crippled by one fatal absence: air cover. The HMS Indomitable, meant to accompany the task force, had run aground in the Caribbean weeks earlier, leaving Admiral Phillips with no aircraft of his own. Without fighters overhead, his ships would face the full weight of Japanese bombers alone. Yet, bound by confidence and outdated doctrine, he pressed on. The problem ran deeper than missing planes. Coordination between the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force in the Far East was chaotic. Fighter squadrons stationed in Singapore and northern Malaya were stretched thin, their pilots trained for land defense, not naval interception. Even if Admiral Phillips had called for help, response would have come too late. The skies above Malaya were already owned by Japan, and Force Z would soon sail straight beneath them. On the evening of December 8, 1941, as darkness settled over Singapore's harbor, Force Z slipped quietly into open water. The order was simple: intercept and destroy Japanese invasion convoys along the eastern coast of Malaya. No lights, no radio transmissions, and no distress calls were permitted. The fleet vanished into the night under a shroud of tropical rain, the faint glow of the city fading behind them. At the center of the formation sailed Prince of Wales and Repulse, flanked by 4 destroyers: Electra, Express, Vampire, and Torpedoes, their decks slick with rain. The humid air carried the low hum of engines and the muffled rhythm of boots against steel. For most aboard, this was not fear, but focus, the calm before something inevitable. Admiral Phillips believed that poor weather might shield the fleet from Japanese reconnaissance. The plan was to strike swiftly at the landing sites near Singora and Patani, catching the enemy by surprise before dawn. Yet, unseen to the British, the skies and seas were already under Japanese control. Submarines prowled below, and scouts waited above. As night deepened, the ships maintained silent formation, steady at 18 knots, cutting across black water toward a destiny none aboard could escape. By the afternoon of December 9th, the calm sea around the Anamba Islands betrayed no sign of danger. The men of Prince of Wales and Repulse believed they were still unseen. But beneath the surface, the hunter had already found them. At 14:15, the Japanese submarine I-65 spotted the British formation slicing northeast through the South China Sea and swiftly transmitted a sighting report to headquarters in Saigon. That single message sealed their fate. Within hours, Japanese reconnaissance planes roared into the skies from bases in Indochina, confirming Force Z's position. At Admiral Yamamoto's direction, the 22nd Air Flotilla was reinforced with long-range G-3M Nell and G-4M Betty bombers, aircraft capable of flying hundreds of miles with deadly torpedoes slung beneath their wings. Meanwhile, on the surface, the Imperial Navy had positioned powerful backup forces: Vice Admiral Kondo's distant cover force and Ozawa's cruisers, armed with the fearsome Type 93 Long Lance torpedoes, unmatched in range and power. If Force Z stumbled into them, it would face annihilation, even without air attack. While the British slept under a false moonlit calm, dozens of Japanese bombers and submarines were already converging. The trap was set. The hunters were closing in. Late on the night of December 9th, a coded message reached Admiral Phillips aboard Prince of Wales. It claimed that new Japanese landings were underway near Kuantan, halfway down Malaya's eastern coast. The report was unverified, likely an error or rumor, but it carried the weight of urgency. Believing he could strike a decisive blow against enemy transports, Phillips made a fateful choice. Force Z turned south. In that moment, the hunter unknowingly moved deeper into the trap. As the ships changed bearing, Japanese patrol planes above the clouds tracked every move. From bases near Saigon, air crews of the Genzan Air Group radioed exact coordinates back to command. In the darkness, another Japanese float plane sighted the British formation and dropped a single flare, a lonely streak of light that briefly cut the night. It was spotted by the destroyer Electra, but no contact followed, both sides unaware how close they had come. Unknown to either force, Japanese surface fleets under Kondo and Ozawa were only miles away. A night battle, had it occurred, might have been disastrous for both sides, but fortune, or fate, kept the ocean quiet. Before dawn, the Japanese submarine I-58 again sighted Force Z and launched a spread of torpedoes. All missed, but the message sent back to Saigon confirmed what command already suspected. The British fleet had reversed course and was heading directly for Kuantan. Above, bombers were being fueled, armed, and briefed. The sky would soon come alive with death. Beneath the dark calm, the final day of Force Z had begun. Just before dawn on December 10, 1941, the sea off Kuantan was eerily calm. The horizon glowed pale gold as Prince of Wales and Repulse slowed to a cautious drift. No smoke, no landing craft, no trace of battle, only still water and silence. At 0730, the Repulse launched her Walrus seaplane for reconnaissance, the biplane vanishing into the mist to confirm what the destroyers soon reported. There were no Japanese landings at Kuantan. The intelligence had been wrong. There would be no easy target today. With the coast empty, Admiral Phillips ordered a new course, southeast, back towards Singapore. His men felt a brief sense of relief. The mission might have failed, but at least they would live to fight another day. Yet above the clouds, the enemy already knew their position. A Japanese reconnaissance plane from the Genzan Air Group had sighted them hours earlier, transmitting precise coordinates to Saigon. At 10:05, the small destroyer Torpedoes, detached earlier due to low fuel, was spotted trailing far behind the main formation. She became the first to face the enemy. A formation of bombers swooped down and dropped their loads, but the little ship danced across the waves, weaving through explosions and escaping unharmed. It was a warning, though few realized it. By late morning, Force Z was utterly alone. No air support, no reinforcements, no warning of what was coming. To the sailors scanning the sky, the air still seemed empty. But on the radar screens aboard Prince of Wales, faint contacts were beginning to appear. Tiny blips approaching fast. The calm sea that morning would soon erupt into chaos. In less than an hour, Force Z's fate would be decided from the sky. At 10:40 a.m., the radar aboard Prince of Wales flickered to life. Multiple inbound contacts closing fast. The calm that had carried Force Z through the morning shattered in an instant. Alarms screamed. Men raced to their stations as ammunition hoists clattered and the decks trembled beneath their boots. The ships were spread across open water. Prince of Wales and Repulse steaming on parallel courses with Express ahead and Electra and Vampire trailing behind. To the south, Torpedoes was too far away to help. Above them, the sky darkened with black dots, the first wave of Japanese bombers. At 1100, 8 Mitsubishi G3M Nell bombers from the Mihoro Air Group descended from 3,000 meters, gliding into attack formation. The British gunners opened fire at 11:09, their 5.25-inch and 4-inch guns roaring skyward, shells bursting in white puffs across the clouds. Admiral Phillips, hoping to disrupt enemy aim, ordered a sharp turn to starboard, but the sudden maneuver threw off British firing solutions as well. The flak went wide. At 11:13, a 250-kilogram bomb struck Repulse aft, tearing through her catapult deck and exploding inside the hangar. A burst of flame engulfed her Walrus seaplane, sending black smoke curling into the humid air. Several men were scalded by ruptured steam pipes, but damage control moved swiftly. The fire was contained, and the ship stayed in formation. For a brief moment, it seemed they had weathered the attack. Then the sky fell silent. It was a trap. Moments later, the second wave appeared. Genzan Kokutai torpedo bombers, skimming the sea at terrifying speed. They split into two groups, fanning wide to flank Prince of Wales. The big guns could not depress low enough. Smaller Ehrlichins and pom-poms opened up, tracing lines of fire across the waves. It wasn't enough. One torpedo slammed into the port side, just forward of the outer propeller shaft. Steam erupted from broken valves. The port propeller jammed and twisted violently, ripping open the shaft tunnel. Water poured in, flooding compartment after compartment. The ship listed 11 degrees to port, lights flickering as engineers fought to stabilize her. The list eased slightly after counterflooding, but her engines groaned under strain. Below decks, communications failed, and men worked in darkness, waist-deep in rising water. Meanwhile, Repulse was fighting for her life. The second group of bombers turned on her next, lining up for their runs. Captain William Tennant ordered full helm. His ship swerved across the torpedo tracks, dodging one after another with masterful precision. 8 torpedoes sliced through her wake but missed. The crew erupted in cheers. For now, she had survived. But the sea was only catching its breath. The real storm was still gathering just beyond the clouds. The second wave had barely withdrawn when the next assault came roaring in. Genzan Air Group torpedo bombers sweeping low over the waves, sunlight flashing off their wings. Their target, Prince of Wales. The British battleship, already crippled by the earlier hit, could barely maneuver. Her gunners tried to track the attackers, but the big 5.25-inch mounts couldn't depress low enough. Pom-poms and Ehrlichins opened up instead, spitting streams of tracers that stitched the sea white with foam. Moments later, 3 torpedoes slammed into her hull in rapid succession. One exploded just forward of B turret, another amidships, and a third beneath the steering compartment aft. The shock threw men from their stations. Flooding ripped through the lower decks, and power failed across multiple sections. The proud battleship, symbol of British naval might, was dying fast. Meanwhile, Repulse was still dancing with death. Captain William Tennant maneuvered like a duelist, twisting through one torpedo spread after another. The ship's agility saved her again and again, the crew cheering each narrow escape. But the final attack came from multiple angles. 8 torpedoes launched in perfect unison. 4 found their mark. Her engines faltered, fires raged, and the hull groaned in agony. Pumps failed, compartments flooded, and the once proud battlecruiser began to slow, her deck tilting underfoot. By 11:30 a.m., the sea had turned into a killing ground. Columns of black smoke rose from Prince of Wales and Repulse as the next wave approached. 26 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers of the Kanoya Air Group. They came in from the east, flying in 3 tight squadrons, gliding low over the water. Each carried a single Type 91 aerial torpedo, a weapon designed precisely for moments like this. The British ships opened fire with everything they had left, guns thundering and tracers tearing across the sky, but the enemy formation held steady. The precision, the discipline, it was unlike anything the Royal Navy had ever faced. The Prince of Wales, still crippled from the earlier hit, struggled to turn. Her port propeller was gone, her rudder sluggish. The bombers split into two groups, one attacking from port, the other from starboard, closing in from opposite sides like a tightening noose. Within minutes, 3 torpedoes slammed home. One struck forward near B turret, another amidships, and the third exploded under the steering compartment aft. The proud battleship was dying. Fires spread uncontrolled. The list to port deepened. Below decks, hundreds were trapped behind jammed hatches, hammering desperately as the ship groaned around them. Electrical systems collapsed, communication lines dead, fire control centers silent. In the dark, officers shouted orders no one could hear. Meanwhile, Repulse was still fighting, weaving through wave after wave of torpedo bombers. Captain William Tennant, his hands firm on the helm, maneuvered like a fencer dodging death. Twice she escaped entire salvos. Men below deck cheered, believing their ship blessed. But then came the final attack. Another squadron swooping in from the southeast, launching 8 torpedoes in a perfect fan. This time, Repulse had nowhere left to run. 4 torpedoes struck home. One near the engine room, another by the rudder, a third forward, and one to starboard. The ship lurched violently. Power failed, and the great battlecruiser began to slow. Bulkheads groaned. Fires raged unchecked. The sea itself seemed to roar as water poured in. Yet even in those final moments, her guns continued to fire, defiantly spitting flame at the descending bombers. But courage could not change physics. As the pumps failed and the deck tilted sharply, Captain Tennant gave the order that no sailor wishes to hear: abandon ship. By 12:30 p.m., both ships were beyond saving. The sea was filled with oil, fire, and men struggling for life. Above them, the bombers turned home, their mission complete. Below them, the pride of the Royal Navy sank beneath the waves. By 12:30 p.m., the sea around Repulse had turned into a cauldron of fire. Waves rolled thick with oil and smoke, the air filled with the hiss of steam and the screams of the wounded. Captain William Tennant, soaked in sweat and seawater, knew his ship could not endure another hit. The 4 torpedoes that had torn through her hull had sealed her fate. With power gone, pumps failing, and fires spreading uncontrollably, he gave the only order left: abandon ship. Men scrambled for ropes, rafts, or simply leapt into the burning sea. Some clung to debris, others helped wounded comrades reach the rails. The ship rolled sharply, her stern rising as the bow slipped under. At 12:32 p.m., Repulse disappeared beneath the surface with a deep metallic groan, leaving only swirling oil and floating wreckage behind. Nearby, the destroyers Electra and Vampire raced through the chaos, dodging wreckage and survivors alike. Their crews threw lines, nets, and wooden planks into the water, dragging men aboard, some burned, some barely conscious, others refusing rescue until their injured mates were pulled in first. But for Prince of Wales, salvation would not come. Listing badly to port, the battleship was mortally wounded. All power was gone, her engines silent. Fires spread across the decks, ammunition stores flooded, and the wheelhouse had taken a direct hit. Inside, men were trapped behind jammed hatches, pounding desperately as water rose around them. Captain John Leach and Admiral Tom Phillips stood together on the bridge, refusing evacuation. Officers pleaded for them to leave, but both men declined, remaining at their posts as the ship's list grew steeper. Nearby, the destroyer Express attempted the impossible, maneuvering alongside to rescue survivors. Her stern scraped against the sinking battleship, railings torn away, but her crew kept hauling men aboard. Finally, the great battleship rolled to port. Her guns slid silently beneath the waves, the Union Jack fluttering once before vanishing into foam. In minutes, HMS Prince of Wales, the ship that had once helped bring down the Bismarck, was gone. Rescue continued for another hour. 840 men were dead, among them Phillips and Leach. Captain Tennant survived, pulling men from the water himself. By the time the last survivor was aboard, the ocean had grown eerily still again. The storm clouds broke. At 2:20 p.m., fighter aircraft from the Royal Australian Air Force finally arrived, too late. When the smoke finally cleared over the South China Sea, Force Z was gone. In a few short hours, two of Britain's proudest warships, HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse, had vanished beneath the waves without ever exchanging fire with an enemy fleet. No carrier had led the assault, no naval guns had thundered in reply. The sky alone had destroyed them. For the first time in history, land-based aircraft had annihilated major capital ships on open water. The age of the battleship, the iron symbol of imperial power, was over. In Singapore, the news struck like lightning. Commanders stared in disbelief. The public felt the ground shift beneath the Empire's feet. The loss of Force Z shattered confidence in Britain's ability to defend the Far East. Across the world, in London, politicians and admirals finally understood what Japan had already proven, that air power now ruled the seas. For Japan, the victory confirmed their boldest beliefs. Speed, coordination, and air superiority could overcome even the heaviest armor. In the days ahead, their fleets moved freely through the region. The South China Sea, once guarded by the Royal Navy, was now theirs. The world had changed overnight. The story of Force Z is more than a naval tragedy. It's a reminder that pride and tradition can blind even the strongest to change. The British Admiralty clung to the belief that the past would protect them, that armor and courage were enough against innovation and adaptation. But history showed otherwise. Strength without awareness becomes fragility. Power without humility breeds downfall. In our own lives, we too face moments when the world changes faster than we expect, when old ways no longer work, and the storm is already above us. The lesson of Force Z is simple, yet eternal. Never underestimate change, and never assume yesterday's victories will win tomorrow's battles. If this story moved you, tell us what lesson you take from it. Do you believe humanity truly learns from its past? And if you love history told through moments of courage, tragedy, and truth, subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next story that shaped our world.